So many people get CrossFit wrong when they're first starting out, so I thought I'd take you through the most common mistakes most people make when they're starting CrossFit whilst I make my breakfast, so that you don't make these mistakes. CrossFit gets a bad rep, and I really don't think it should. You just have to make sure that you're doing it properly to get the most out of it. So number one is trying to do too much too soon. This can be in classes where you pick the RX weight when you're not ready to, or you do a movement you're not ready to do. There's so many progressions that you need to make with CrossFit, and you need to make the first one before you move on to the next. So for instance, you need to have strict pull-ups before you attempt any kipping. You need to have knee raises before you attempt any toes to bar. You need to have push press before you try push jerk or split jerk. And it's really, really important that you don't miss these steps. Another big one is mobility. If you don't have good mobility, you're not going to be able to perform that many CrossFit movements at all. People often skip the mobility part, so you really just need to make sure that your mobility is good, and if it's not, you need to work on making sure it gets better. Which brings me to my next point of a lot of people just don't do mobility at all. So one of the most common mistakes is that people just don't do mobility. If you're trying to do something like a pistol squat or a clean where you reach full depth, you're gonna need pretty good ankle mobility. And most people don't have that unless they've had some sort of sporting background. So making sure that you double down on mobility almost as hard as you do CrossFit classes, like do it twice a day if you have to, is gonna really, really benefit your CrossFit in the long run. And that's usually why so many people get injured doing CrossFit, is because they can't move properly or they can't quite reach that certain position, and then they blame CrossFit for the reason that they've got injured when really they just haven't been doing things properly. Next one I have got down is using too many gadgets. I'm actually sharing this week on my Instagram a CrossFit starter pack and all the things that I think you need to start CrossFit, which includes things like gymnastics grips, but it definitely doesn't include lifters or a belt, which is what a lot of people, and I did when I first started CrossFit, run to get immediately, and you really just don't need them. The next point is not doing anything outside of classes. So if you go to a good CrossFit gym, this might not be the case and you might be okay, but most CrossFit gyms maybe don't warm up properly, maybe don't include accessories, and they're just really important pieces to ensure your CrossFit performance, but also like making sure you don't get injured in the long run. So I would highly, highly recommend getting there a little bit before your class if you're doing classes, so that you can warm up properly for it, and then maybe even staying afterwards to do some accessories. And by that I mean sort of things that will help your shoulder strength, your core. Maybe there's a skill that you want to progress in. Let's say you want to work towards muscle ups. You're probably not going to be working on those higher skill movements in the class for a prolonged period of time, and things like double unders, handstands, bar muscle ups, all of that stuff, they need a lot of hours of practice. So if you're just going to your CrossFit class 4 or 5, 3 times a week, you're just not going to get the practice in of those enough. So I would highly recommend going outside of classes to get some extra work in. However, bringing us on to point number 5 is making sure that you do properly focus on your recovery. Depending on what your sort of sporting level has been like before you start CrossFit, you may need to not do as many CrossFit sessions as you have been doing gym sessions before, or if you're like really good sport, you're an athlete or whatever, you'll probably be fine with this. But if you're just an everyday gym goer, then I would recommend slowly building up to 5 or 6 classes a week rather than just starting at that many, just because CrossFit is intense and it is going to put a lot of strain on your body, and it means that your body's going to take a little bit longer to recover from that. So yeah, make sure you're really focusing on recovery and building up to those classes as well. So not focusing on recovery is a really big common mistake. Another big one with recovery is making sure that you're at least eating at maintenance calories. So this means making sure that you are eating enough for what your body needs, and this might have gone up since you started CrossFit because, like I just mentioned, it's quite intense and your body might not be used to it. So that's going to give you the best, one of the best reasons or ways to recover from your classes or your training sessions, alongside making sure that you're sleeping at least 7 hours a night. You should be doing that anyway, but just need to double down on it. And then also your hydration levels, making sure that you are drinking enough as well. When you're just starting out with CrossFit, you're very likely to be getting some beginner gains, and you want to capitalize on these because they don't come around again. So you need to make sure that you are recovering so that you can then get the best and make the most out of those beginner gains as well. So that concludes the 5 common mistakes that I've seen when people start out with CrossFit. Hope you've liked this video. If you have, I would really appreciate it if you could give me a little like and subscribe, as I am a very new channel and really appreciate you guys watching.